Guten Abend, meine Freunde. Welcome back to the Old Warlock. And if any of you speak German, I don't want to hear a word about it.
I was going to say, if any of you speak German,
keep it to yourselves.
Yeah, because, yeah.
3 semesters of German. During COVID, I didn't remember any.
He can remember ja and
Jawohl.
nein and yeah.
Yeah, and bratwurst.
Which he knew before.
Was that offensive to... I feel like it was. I feel like that was stereotyping somehow.
Saying that all Germans eat bratwurst all the time?
Yeah. That's not what I was saying.
Probably, right?
That's not what I was saying. But...
He probably was.
This is a weird start to a video. What are we talking about today?
We're talking about the D&D history. We're going on the way back. That's where I like to go.
I was trying to think of like some kind of thing we could do for the way. Never mind. Sorry.
Moving on.
I'm
going to talk to you today about something called Dungeon Geomorphs.
Thumbnail.
Oh, good point. Good point. Dungeon Geomorphs. Dungeon Geomorphs are interesting. They were how I got my start in Dungeons and Dragons. Way back in the day, my friend Calvin was the person...
Calvin doesn't watch these videos.
He doesn't watch these videos, but Calvin, if you ever happen to stumble upon one of these videos,
hi, Calvin.
You're mentioned in it.
Yeah.
Calvin does still play in my campaign.
He does.
Here, from 1978, this is 2023, he still plays in my campaign.
Great guy, Calvin.
Back in the day, Calvin is. He's a good guy. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, Calvin... I had learned about Dungeons & Dragons from another friend of mine. I told Calvin about Dungeons & Dragons, how much I wanted to play the game. He and I used to play a lot of war games at that time. This is when I was in my early teens. But we both spent a fair bit of time at the local hobby shop. But Calvin spent more time there than I did because he was also not only a war gamer, he was also a model builder. So the only place in our hometown to pick up models and war games was at this tiny little hobby store that you had to walk through a neighborhood, through the city cemetery. It was maybe 1.5 miles away. And I was waiting for the opportune moment to go and pick up a copy of this Dungeons and Dragons game that I had heard of. Calvin got there ahead of me because he was there more often than I was. He picked up a Holmes Basic boxed set of Dungeons and Dragons.
The Holmes Basic?
The Holmes Basic. We've done a video on that.
We have.
If you're interested in it, look it up. It's a really cool set. He bought the Holmes Basic set and he brought it back home and he showed it to me and I said, hey, I really want to know how to play this game. How about if I take the rule set and I make a dungeon for you to play in? That's another story. How that turned out is another story. The important part about that is that located within that original set was the Dungeon Geomorphs. These were in there to help you make your own dungeon.
And these are pretty neat.
These are pretty cool. I recently managed to get a hold of the original PDFs, or some PDFs of the original Dungeon Geomorphs. And since I used Calvin's Geomorphs way back in the day to make my first dungeon, I thought it would be nice if I replaced them with a new set. And that got me to thinking, a lot of people might not know about the Geomorphs, and maybe we should talk about them in this video. So, These were the ones that were available in that first Holmes Basic D&D set. Now what they are, these were created by Gary Gygax in 1976. At least that's the copyright date on this, and I think that's probably about right. They are not advanced Dungeons & Dragons. They are original Dungeons & Dragons
the good stuff.
Materials. So what they are... And we're always saying we're going to throw things up on the screen.
I will
place this on the screen.
Yeah.
All they were is a series of maps. They were made in blue so that you could not photocopy them. And
look at us now.
And here we are. And what you would do is just hold that one right there. Because what you would do is you would put them together in whatever way you wanted to make your own dungeon. And they recommended that you cut them down certain lines, which I did. That's why I had to give Calvin a new set, because I chopped up his original Geomorphs back in the day. And I still have them, and I'll be talking about those in another video. But they gave you enough of these to where you could make a pretty cool dungeon. And I ended up getting 2 different dungeon levels out of these. Now, I have to say that these ended up having a pretty strong impact on my early game. I don't know if I've talked about this in an earlier video. I think I might have. Originally, D&D to us was a dungeon crawl. It was just one step beyond a war game. But the goal was you had your character, they had a sword, they had a shield, they had armor. They went down into a dungeon, they killed monsters, got treasure, went back and tried to upgrade their power.
Simple enough.
Yeah, it's D&D, but at the same time, these early dungeons didn't have a lot of dungeon ecology. There was no real rhyme or reason. Looking back over these, I think that part of the reason for those early nonsensical, if you will, dungeons was because of me starting to use the Dungeon Geomorphs and going off of their examples of how they should be peopled or charactered or
fleshed
monster.
out,
Fleshed. That's probably a better term. For instance, they have here on the encounter key example. So this is just, hey, here's how you can make your dungeon. Here's the kind of things that you would put into a different room. So the first one is a room for room number 1. Example. A rudely furnished room with an old holy man, lawful good, who has sworn a vow of silence. He will not fight if attacked. He takes only 2 hit points. There is a pottery flask containing his drinking water in one corner. A small container near his pallet has a handful of lentils, all of his food. There are some rags hanging from a nail in the wall, and a wooden begging bowl on a rough wooded table near the door holds 1 silver piece and 3 copper. If he is impolitely treated or his room is searched, he will do nothing, but he will never aid the offenders. If so much as a single copper piece is dropped in his bowl, he will make a holy sign, which will add 1 hit point permanently to all of the party's members. After doing the latter, he will disappear when the party leaves, and he will be replaced by 1A. 1A is an insane fiend, conforming generally to the description of one above. He will say nothing until a party is in his abode, but will then attack with 2 hidden daggers. He takes 12 hit points with an armor class equal to 5 due to his 18 dexterity. He has no treasure to begin with. So you have that. This is actually kind of cool.
I like
this. But in room 2, which has to be in the very close vicinity,
yeah.
let's do room 3, which has to be in the very close vicinity, there are 4 spiders, 4 large spiders. They tend to lurk directly above the entryway and have a 50% chance of surprising any party entering. Only the largest has normal poison, and if the other 3 bite, the victim has a +4 on his saving throw, etc., etc., etc. My point being,
why would there be a weak little holy man next to 4 spiders?
Like next to these 4 spiders, and I think that I took my clues, some of my early clues, teenage 15-year-old Jim, took my clues from the way that this was described in this original Dungeon Geomorph set.
Yeah.
And that's how we played the game for the first few months that I ended up playing.
Yes.
Now, these are cool though. I really like these as not only as a piece of D&D history, but they're actually still useful today if you do a lot of two-dimensional tabletop play. Because not only were there the original set 1 basic Dungeon Geomorphs, you could purchase set 2, Caverns and Caves, or Caves and Caverns, which is essentially the same thing, only in more of a cavern form.
I like those ones a little more.
Yeah, these are cool.
Yeah.
These are neat. There was a set 3, which was Lower Dungeons, which is just more of the same. Mm-hmm. Same type of thing. But one of the ones that I think were actually the most cool
are
Outdoor Geomorphs. And this is a D&D playing aid, set 1, Walled City. And again, these were by Gary Gygax. Set 3 was by Gary Gygax. Set 2, the Caves and Caverns, those were by Gary and Ernie Gygax. Ernie was Gary Gygax's son. But the AD&D playing aid set 1, Walled City, is pretty substantial. There's like 18 pages of these things. It has a list of, and I will put these up on the screen. It has the way that you actually develop a city. So the city or town tells you need to put a history together. It's always a good idea to have at least a brief history of the town or city sketched out beforehand. Divisions, how is your city divided up? Different things happen in different places within the city. What is the government? What is the military force? What are the occupations of the people who live there? Is it a mining town? Is it a trade center? It gives you a lot of good ideas to follow when you're trying to develop your city. Then it has this whole list of typical occupations for the people who might be in your city. Something that as a beginner D&D player, I thought it was pretty cool to have that. But then you just have a series again of these geomorphs that you can cut apart and thread together. So you've got walls, you've got towers, you've got different city sections, you have different styles of architecture, as you can see. You've got this one, this particular geomorph has a river running through it. And even today, I think that these would be a valuable thing to have. I mean, I do a lot of my stuff online.
Especially.
Yeah, I think that these would be a really good thing.
Yeah, because I think that there is a certain difficulty with coming up with towns and cities. It seems like a daunting task to go through and actually put all those together, because there's a lot that goes on. You know, you think about, I don't know, New York or something like that. Huge place, tons of stuff that's going on. Even if you go back in history and you look at Rome when it was the height of the Roman Empire, there's still a huge amount of people there, a huge amount of things going on, and there's a lot of detail that you have to put into place. But if you have these, boom.
Yep.
Crank it out. And you can randomize it depending on the adventure, so there will be some similarities, but it'll also be different depending on the way you organize it. So...
Well, and there are different densities too. So you can have, this one is a much more densely populated city because the buildings are so much closer together. And then you have more lightly populated areas of the same city or a more lightly populated city in general.
Yeah.
It ends up kind of wrapping up with traffic routes, going through how to label traffic routes as thoroughfares or places or mews or circles or crescents. It tells you, keep an eye on putting open places into your city. Buildings and different types of construction, religious buildings, associations and groups. Just a really good basic set of things for putting together your city or your town. They do give a little bit of a description here. They talk about the Old Gate as one example. This gate to the city is open from dawn until dusk. It is guarded by 24 men-at-arms in leather armor.
They're ready to throw down.
They are all armed with dagger, sword, and halberd. At any time, there are 8 on duty. Okay.
Oh.
And 4 will have light crossbows in hand. So it goes on and on from there. It talks about the Silvery Mart. Place is named because of the number of fish and fish scales around. And it gives a good long description about how that should be written out. And it also talks about an individual building, the Anchor Tavern. A generally unremarkable drinking and eating establishment, average cost, fair beer, ale, and white wine, mostly fish and similar food. It is frequented by typical fisher folk. So, again, it's very good food for thought.
Yeah.
In terms of the development of these things. Now, one last thing that I will point out here: this item is only one of the many popular playing aids for Dungeons & Dragons. Got an ad here on it. Produced by TSR Hobbies, Inc., other D&D accessory items currently available include Dungeon Geomorphs Set 1, $2.49. Dungeon Geomorphs Set 2, $2.49, and so on. The Walled City, $3.49. Then it's also got a Monster and Treasure Assortment, Set 1. I do not have that. I've never seen it. Again, $2.49. D&D character sheet pads, $2.98 for those.
Let me tell you, those go for quite a bit of money.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Anyway, I thought that this was cool enough to point out to people who may not have ever known that the geomorphs existed. Mm-hmm. These are old. You were looking 76, 77, 70, I think 76 was the earliest that these were created. The rest of them came out 77, 78.
I think that these are very cool, and I think that the town one in particular illustrates a bit of a shift in the thinking of what the game is going to be.
Yes,
changes it from
strong point.
From just a dungeon crawl, little basic adventures, into high fantasy, bigger campaigns with more going on. You're going out from that original starting area and you can explore different parts of a world. So there's starting to be more that goes into it. There's more creativity, there's more thinking, there's more of all of that goes into these games. And I think this is a great way to kind of, even just through the years, see that over 5 years or so.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, and that hadn't really occurred to me as I was looking over this.
Yeah.
Because when I started, it was dungeon crawl. You had a village that you went to, you had your dungeon, you went through the dungeon crawl. That was the game. I'll be doing a video later on that explains how my game paradigm shifted because of the actions of one of my players who made me realize that the game could be so much more, as is indicated by developing an entire city for your players to be in.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So they're not necessarily the most useful things if you're looking for just picking them up and you want to have a detailed kind of story-oriented dungeon, but if you're lost and you're, running for time, you've got these and you can crank out something pretty quick for people to run through.
Well, and I think that it might be fun also just to create one out of these Dungeon Geomorphs, and just to know that this is how dungeons were originally laid out.
Yeah.
So I mean that might be kind of fun just from the sake of historical validity. So
yes,
Dungeon Geomorphs. Have a look around. You can still find them from every now and then. They may be available on Drive-Thru RPG, but I do not know for sure anymore.
Go look for us. See if you can find out.
Let us know.
Let us know what you find out. And if you have any of the original ones, like the actual original physical ones, we would love to, have you send us a picture or something.
Well, and I still have my the dungeon that I still have the dungeon that I made out of Calvin's original set. I'll be putting those up somewhere at some point on time.
Perhaps on the website. We'll see. We'll find out.
But I'll be talking about that dungeon later on, but not in this particular video. But I think that's all I have.
That's all I have as well. Thank you so much.
We're going to flip our table.
I know. Thank you so much for coming by.
Dungeon Geomorphs.
Dungeon Geomorphs. Check out the description below for all of our fascinating, wonderful, and incredible content to keep you guys entertained for as long as you could possibly need to be.
Or for like a couple minutes.
For 75 videos worth.
Anyway.
Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for stopping by.
We appreciate it.
I'm Jim.
I'm Alex.
Keep your sword on free.
Toodaloo.